What if a simple game was asked to heal a broken town? What if every pitch carried the weight of land, work, and pride? What if whispers of sabotage turned neighbors into enemies? And what if, in the middle of it all, a boy was marked for death? In Redford, one baseball game became more than sport. It became a trap, a reckoning, and a choice between survival and ruin. Welcome to WestDream Tales, where the forgotten spirit of the frontier lives on. Here, every story is a battle between hope and ruin, and tonight, we step into Redford, on the day a single baseball game threatened to tear a town apart. Redford was a mining town built on copper, timber, and restless ambition. For years, and it had been a place where locals carried the weight of heritage, and newcomers were kept at the edge. That balance broke when Mayor Edward Caraway opened the gates to immigrant labor. The mines dug deeper, the mills roared louder, but resentment grew faster than profit. Word had spread of railroad contracts coming west, bringing wealth to towns that could prove their worth. Locals whispered, "He sold us out for cheap hands." Immigrants muttered, "We just want a chance to live." Victor Kane, the deputy mayor, saw opportunity in the bitterness. He had once been the chosen heir to Redford's old mayor, but fate and Caraway's charisma had stolen that seat. Now, every quarrel in the streets, every fistfight in the tavern, felt like tinder for his revenge. The town's grand event came each summer, the Redford Athletic Fair. For decades, it had been the locals' pride, the stage for baseball called the King of Games. Immigrants had never been allowed to play until this year. Against all odds, an immigrant team had fought their way through the brackets. Now the final game was set, locals on one side, immigrants on the other. A championship turned into a trial, with the entire town watching. Elias Harper stepped onto the field as captain of the local squad. A scarred veteran of the war, he carried his father's legacy like a burden. His father had been Redford's sheriff, a man of stern justice whose shadow still lingered. On the opposite side stood Jack Callahan, blacksmith and leader of the immigrants, strong hands hardened by fire and iron. He was the voice his people trusted most. By his side, in the front row of the bleachers, sat his 12-year-old son, Tommy, eyes bright with pride. But between Elias and Jack ran an old wound. Years ago, when Jack was nearly lynched by an angry mob, Elias's father had turned away instead of protecting him. The scar from that night still burned, and the two men had never forgiven each other. Now fate had set them as captains of rival teams. Every swing, every throw, carried not just points but years of bitterness. The crowd felt it too, roaring in two tongues, split down the middle like the town itself. Mayor Caraway addressed them before the first pitch. His silver hair caught the sun as his voice boomed. Today, Redford decides whether it stands divided or stands as one. Applause rippled, but it was thin, swallowed quickly by shouts from both sides. In the stands, Victor Kane leaned against the rail, eyes cold. To the locals, he whispered, "They'll take your land if they win." To the immigrants, he murmured, "Lose today, and they'll drive you from the mills." Caraway's speech ended, and tension fell heavy as iron. The umpire barked for the players to line up. Bats clattered, gloves slapped, and 1,000 eyes locked on the diamond. Tommy leaned over the rail, calling out, "Do it for us." Dad Jack raised his glove, forcing a smile despite the weight in his chest. Across the field, Elias pulled his cap low, muttering, "For Redford." The crowd surged with anticipation. Locals stomped the bleachers. Immigrants answered with chants of their own. It sounded less like a ball game and more like drums of war. Elias and Jack stepped forward for the ceremonial handshake. Their hands met rough, reluctant, unyielding. Neither man spoke, but their eyes promised the game ahead would be more than sport. The umpire raised his arm. The pitcher wound up. And as the first ball left his hand, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. The night before the final, Victor Kane rode out beyond the timberline. The lantern glow from town faded behind him, replaced by the hush of crickets and the creak of saddle leather. At a cabin half hidden in the pines, a single lamp waited. Warren Pike sat inside, boots on the table, eyes restless. He was the kind of man who always looked cornered, even when no one was chasing him. When Victor entered, Warren straightened, sensing the weight of what was coming. Victor poured whiskey into 2 chipped mugs. "This game is Caraway's gamble. he said flatly. If it ends in peace, he'll walk into the next election untouchable. Warren tilted his head. And if it doesn't, Victor's smile was thin as paper. Then Redford burns. And so does Caraway. He slid something across the table, a heavy gold pocket watch. The initials on its back gleamed even in the dim light. Warren's eyes widened. The watch had belonged to Redford's old mare, the man who had died in a riding accident. Victor's voice dropped lower. You kept quiet when the horse went wild. You covered my tracks. Now, you'll finish what we started. Warren's throat tightened, fingers closing around the watch like a noose. The boy, Victor said, meaning Tommy Callahan. He's their pride, their future. One shot, and the crowd will tear itself apart. Locals against immigrants. Brother against brother. Caraway won't survive the stain. Warren swallowed hard. And me, you'll be gone before the smoke clears, paid in full. That watch is only the down payment. Victor leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Do this, and the rest of Redford will belong to us. Warren nodded, but unease flickered across his face. He had lived long enough to know when a job could bury him. Still, the promise of money and Victor's shadow hanging over him left no room for refusal. Back in town, Caraway sat in his office, the lamplight catching the silver in his hair. A stack of reports lay open, each page filled with whispers of trouble. Deputy Matthews stood before him, hat in hand. They met at the cabin. Sir, Pike and Kane. Caraway's fingers tapped the desk, slow and steady, and the target Matthews shifted uneasily. They mean to hit the boy, Tommy Callahan. Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking clock. Caraway rose, walking to the window. From here, he could see the faint glow of the baseball grounds being prepared for tomorrow's game. Beyond the field, he imagined the railroad tracks that would soon bind Redford to the wider world if the town survived tomorrow intact. The cheers of children echoed faintly, oblivious to what men were planning in the dark. Keep eyes on Pike, Caraway ordered at last. Put 2 of our men in the stands tomorrow. Quiet, unseen. If Pike makes a move, I want him alive. Matthews hesitated. Shouldn't we stop them now? Caraway's hands trembled slightly as he weighed the cost. He shook his head. Not yet. The town needs to see who Kane truly is. Without proof, we fight shadows. With proof, we bury him. His words were calm, but his reflection in the window showed the weight of calculation. Dawn broke over the baseball field. Players stretched, vendors shouted, and banners snapped in the wind. But beneath the surface, the tension simmered. In the locker room, Elias Harper laced his boots, the scar on his cheek pulling as he frowned. He lifted a bat meant for Tommy and felt the wood bend unnaturally. The handle had been sawed halfway through. He cursed under his breath, tossing it aside. Sabotage wasn't subtle, it was deliberate. Whoever planted it wanted a public accident. Across the hall, Jack Callahan checked his son's glove. When Tommy slid his hand in, he winced. Jack tore it off, revealing a shard of metal stitched into the padding. His jaw tightened. He had worked iron all his life, but this cut deeper than steel. Someone wanted blood. Jack stormed into the hallway just as Elias emerged from the opposite room. Both men stopped, eyes narrowing, each holding the evidence of sabotage. For a moment, old bitterness flickered between them. Elias held up the broken bat. Jack raised the trapped glove. Neither spoke, but the truth was plain. The game had been poisoned. Finally, Elias broke the silence. Somebody wants us to tear each other apart. Jack's voice was iron. And they want to start with the boy. The crowd outside roared as the announcer called for the players. Elias and Jack exchanged a grim nod, an alliance carved out of necessity, not forgiveness. They walked together toward the light of the field, carrying more than bats on their shoulders. Victor Kane arrived last, his suit pressed, his smile thin. From the stands, he looked like any proud official, clapping politely as teams jogged out. But in his pocket, his fingers brushed the empty chain where the old mayor's watch had once hung. Warren Pike melted into the crowd, hat low, coat heavy. The revolver inside felt like a stone dragging him down. Every step toward the bleachers carried the echo of Victor's words, one shot, and Redford burns. High above, Caraway entered quietly with Deputy Matthews at his side. He said nothing, only watched as the two teams lined up on the diamond. The fairgrounds buzzed with energy, blind to the storm gathering in its center. The umpire barked, and players took their places. Elias crouched behind the plate. Jack tightened his grip on the bat. Tommy leaned forward on the bench. The air was sharp with expectation, the kind that cuts before it breaks. Caraway folded his hands behind his back, gaze steady. He already knew Redford was about to bleed. The only question was whose name the town would remember when the dust settled. The crowd filled every inch of the bleachers, voices colliding like storm winds. On one side, the locals waved banners painted with the Redford stag. On the other, immigrants chanted in their own tongue, raising crude flags stitched in the nights before. The air was so charged it felt ready to spark. Vendors shouted half-heartedly, their trays shaking as men shoved past. The fairground wasn't a festival anymore. It was a battlefield waiting for the first shot. The umpire barked. The first pitch cut the air like a knife. The crowd roared, half with triumph, half with fury. Elias Harper crouched low, catching the ball with a snap of leather. The sting in his palm was nothing compared to the sting in the air. Every eye on him carried the weight of judgment. Across the plate, Jack Callahan tightened his grip on the bat. His shoulders still ached from the accidental throw in the warm-ups. He glanced toward the bench. Tommy's small hands clutched the rail, knuckles white. The second pitch came faster, too close to his ribs. Jack twisted, the ball thudding into the dirt. Boos erupted from the immigrant stands, fists pounding the bleachers. Cheap shot, someone shouted. Play fair. Damn you, another roared. The locals shouted back, voices spitting venom. Go back where you came from. Elias stood, mask lifted, glaring at his pitcher. That throw was no accident, he muttered, low enough for only the infield to hear. But he knew scolding wouldn't erase the spark already catching fire in the crowd. The next play came a sharp crack as Jack sent the ball slicing into left field. The immigrant side erupted, Tommy leaping onto the bench screaming, "That's my dad." Jack sprinted to first, chest heaving with both triumph and dread. But from the locals came a wave of jeers. "You'll pay for that," Blacksmith one man bellowed. A bottle flew from the stands, shattering near the baseline. The umpire shouted for order, but his voice was swallowed by the chaos. The bottle's shards glittered in the dirt like a promise of worse to come. Jack's jaw tightened. This wasn't sport anymore. Warren Pike moved through the crowd like smoke, his hat brim low, his coat heavy with the weight of the revolver inside. Each rumor he whispered carried like wildfire. "To the locals," he sneered. "The immigrants brought knives." "To the immigrants," he hissed. "The locals mean to burn your homes tonight." Every word added fuel to the powder keg. On the field, Elias's instincts sharpened. The crowd's rhythm felt too familiar, like the rumble before artillery fire. This wasn't just a game slipping out of control. It was a trap closing shut. Jack caught his eye across the diamond. The two men held the look, old hatred flickering beneath new understanding. They didn't have to speak to know someone wanted this to end in blood. The fourth inning came. Another pitch, another crack, another roar that sounded less like cheer and more like war drums. The air stank of sweat, liquor, and rage. Then it happened. A glass bottle arced high, spinning in the sun, before smashing near the dugout. The sound split the crowd into violence. Immigrants surged forward, fists raised, screaming for justice. Locals leapt from the stands, some armed with bats torn from the rack. The diamond dissolved into a storm of bodies. Elias shoved his catcher's mask aside. "Form up, protect the kids," he barked, voice echoing like a commander's. His players clustered behind him, wide-eyed with fear. Jack swung his bat not at Elias, not at the locals, but at the oncoming mob. "Back off," he roared, clearing space. For the first time in a decade, he and Elias stood side by side. "You trust me now," Elias shouted over the roar. "I don't have to trust you," Jack growled. "I just have to keep them alive." The two men backed toward the mound, their players huddled behind. The bleachers shook as the mob spilled fully onto the field. Vendors' carts overturned, smoke from smashed lanterns curling in the air. The festival banners burned like torches in angry fists. Tommy Callahan darted from the bench, eyes wide, searching for his father. "Dad," he screamed, shoving through the chaos. Jack's heart stopped cold. Warren Pike saw the boy too. He moved faster now, weaving through fists and curses, hand inside his coat. The revolver gleamed as he drew it, hidden low against his leg. Elias caught the motion. His gut clenched the battlefield sense that had saved him before scream now. "Jack, your boy," Jack whirled. Terror etched across his face. Tommy stumbled forward, oblivious, just yards from Warren's aim. The world slowed, every sound muffled except the hammer clicking back. Elias shoved through the mob, body colliding with Jack's. Together he barked. The two men lunged as one. Warren raised the gun, his eyes locked on Tommy's back. For Victor Kane, waiting in the stands. This was the moment that would crown his ambition. One dead child, and Redford would tear itself apart. But Elias and Jack weren't soldiers of Kane's war. They weren't pawns in anyone's game. They crashed into Warren just as his finger tightened on the trigger. The shot cracked, echoing like thunder over the diamond. The bullet tore past, striking the wooden post of the dugout. Screams rose higher, bodies scattering in shock. The revolver clattered to the dirt, kicked away by Elias's boot. Warren snarled, fists swinging, but Jack caught his arm and drove him down. For a moment, three men grappled in the dust, the fate of the town hanging in their grip. The mob surged closer, hungry for blood, not caring whose. Deputy Matthews' men moved from the edge of the crowd, struggling to hold the line. But it was chaos, pure and unstoppable. Tommy cried out again, his small frame nearly swept away in the rush. Jack broke free, shoving bodies aside until he caught his son in his arms. "Stay down, Deborah boy," he shouted, pulling him close. Elias pinned Warren with the strength of a man who had fought for his life before. "Who sent you?" he demanded, rage in every syllable. Warren's hat fell back, his eyes wide with the cornered look of a trapped wolf. Above the roar, Caraway stood at the edge of the field, expression unreadable. His deputies tried to form a cordon, but the storm raged on. The mayor's silence felt deliberate, like he was waiting for something to break. And in the dirt, under Elias's knee, Warren Pike's lips curled into a defiant snarl. "You already know it," he spat. "The name you fear is the one pulling every string here." The crowd heaved again, caught between fury and confusion. And Victor Kane, from his place in the stands, finally rose to his feet. His moment had come, or so he believed. Dust swirled as Warren thrashed under Elias's grip. The man spat curses, his boots gouging trenches into the diamond. Jack pressed in, forcing his weight down hard on Warren's arm. A metallic clink cut through the chaos. Something tumbled from Warren's torn coat pocket and glimmered in the dirt. A pocket watch engraved with the name Mayor Hollis. The crowd froze as one. Every soul in Redford had seen that watch, the pride of the late mayor. Now it lay in the dust at Warren's side, tarnished with guilt. Gasps erupted like firecrackers. "That's Hollis's watch," someone shouted. Another voice rose, trembling with anger. "He had it all along. Warren killed him." Warren's face drained of color. His lips opened, fumbling for denial. But the words stuck like thorns. The mob's roar pressed closer, the weight of truth crushing him in the dirt. Elias yanked him upright by the collar. "Where did you get this?" His voice cut like a knife. Jack's fist tightened, trembling with rage, ready to strike. But Warren's eyes flicked upward, locking on Victor Kane. And in that moment, he broke. "He gave it to me," Warren shouted, voice cracking across the field. The grandstand erupted in stunned silence. Victor Kane stood rigid, pale as chalk, a dozen eyes drilling into him. "You lying dog," he barked, but his voice shook with fear. "You paid me," Warren screamed louder, desperation spilling from every word. "You wanted Tommy Callahan dead. You said if the boy fell, the town would burn." The confession cracked the crowd wide open. Victor staggered forward, sweat beading his brow. His hand fumbled inside his jacket, fingers brushing cold steel. His eyes locked on the boy near the dugout, small, trembling, frozen in place. Tommy. Victor's breath heaved like a trapped animal. If he killed the boy now, chaos would do the rest. Caraway's image would crumble, and maybe he could still slip away. "Get down," Elias roared, seeing the gleam of metal. Victor's revolver cleared the coat in a flash, barrel swinging toward Tommy. The crowd shrieked, bodies scattering, parents dragging children from the field. Jack's world narrowed to that single sight, his son in Victor's sights. He lunged, every muscle fueled by a father's terror. Elias was right behind, boots tearing divots in the dirt. Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, but Jack slammed into him, knocking the barrel skyward. The shot split the air, echoing against the wooden bleachers. Screams filled the diamond. Dust poured down as pigeons burst from the rafters. Victor hit the ground, rolling, his revolver skittering out of reach. Elias pinned him hard, knee digging into his chest. Jack stood over them both, fists clenched, shaking with fury. Tommy scrambled into his father's arms, sobbing against his shirt. Deputies surged from the sidelines at last, forcing through the massive bodies, but they were no longer needed. Victor Kane was finished. "Say it," Elias growled, pressing harder. "Tell them what you did." The weight of hundreds of eyes bore down like a sentence already passed. Victor gasped, fighting for breath. His polished words, his sly charm all gone. What remained was a cornered beast, teeth bared, soul naked. "I was meant to take the chair," he spat, the words ragged. "Hollis promised me the town. Then Caraway stole it." Spittle sprayed as he raged, his pride finally cracking. Gasps rolled through the crowd. Victor's eyes darted wildly, searching for allies, but finding none. He screamed louder, unraveling. "Yes, I killed him." His voice ripped raw. "I hired Pike. I planned the riot. Caraway robbed me, so I took back what was mine." His confession echoed like thunder through the stands. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. Faces twisted with fury. Women clutched children tighter. Men spat into the dirt. Every shred of Victor Kane's power burned to ash before their eyes. Warren Pike sobbed, crumpling where he knelt, bound by Elias's grip. "I just wanted the money," he muttered, staring at nothing. But no one listened. Jack tightened his arms around Tommy. The boy shook, but alive, his small chest heaving. Jack's eyes burned with relief, wet despite himself. Victor thrashed once more, but Elias's weight held him fast. "You'll hang for this," Elias said coldly. "Not by mob justice, but by law. The law you thought you owned." The deputies arrived then, iron cuffs clinking. They snapped onto Victor's wrists with finality. The man who had schemed in shadows was dragged into daylight at last. The crowd surged, shouting, fists pumping with rage and release. Some hurled curses, others prayers, all voices mingling into a storm. For the first time that night, the diamond no longer belonged to the game. It belonged to justice. Victor Kane hung his head, breath ragged, eyes bloodshot, his lips twisted into something between a sneer and a sob. "You think you've won," he rasped. "Mark my words. Caraway, when they learn how you let a child nearly die for your political theater, they'll see you're no better than me." No one answered. The people of Redford had already judged him guilty, and as the deputies dragged him away, his words dissolved into the dirt. Mayor Edward Caraway stepped onto the diamond as if the chaos had been waiting for him. Deputy Matthews flanked him with a line of men, their rifles slung but steady. The crowd, still boiling with fury, hushed at the sight of the mayor walking into the wreckage. He raised a hand, and the deputies tightened the cordon around Victor and Warren. "People of Redford," Caraway's voice rolled like thunder, calm and unshaken. "Tonight proves one thing: Redford will not remain divided." He let the silence hold, drawing every pair of eyes. Then he spoke again, each word measured yesterday. "I signed an agreement with the Northern Pacific. They will need thousands of workers, and they will look to us." Gasps broke into cheers, the crowd erupting into wild relief. For the first time all day, locals and immigrants cheered together. Men clapped strangers on the back. Women wiped tears from their eyes. Children waved pennants, as if the game had been won after all. Victor Kane sagged in his chains, color draining from his face. His lips parted, trembling with realization. You already had it," he rasped. "You let me walk into this trap." Caraway turned to him, eyes steady, voice colder than steel. "Redford needs a mayor strong enough to protect it, not a man who plots murder against a child." Victor's eyes narrowed, desperation mixing with cunning. That railroad contract, it's not that simple to secure. How did you? Caraway's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Since it's over anyway, he said quietly. I suppose there's no harm in telling you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. The man behind Northern Pacific owes me a debt. An old one. Victor's face went ashen. You mean, from the beginning, you could have solved this conflict, but instead, you let it burn? A thin smile touched Caraway's lips. How else could I draw you into the open? You're very good at covering your tracks, Victor, but desperation makes even careful men careless. Victor's laugh was bitter, hollow. You used the whole town as bait. I saved the whole town, Caraway corrected, his voice like winter steel. From you? Victor's protest dissolved into a broken laugh, his last defense crumbling with him. The deputies dragged him back, the mob's cheers drowning his curses. Caraway crossed the diamond, his coat brushing the dirt of the ruined field. He stopped before Elias Harper and Jack Callahan, two men who had fought on opposite sides until this night. He extended his hands, one to each. Redford thanks you both, Caraway said. Tomorrow the game will be played again. Not as a weapon, not as a riot, but as a bond between neighbors. The crowd roared approval, voices shaking the wooden stands. Elias felt the mayor's grip, firm and certain, yet too polished. Jack met his gaze, the same unease stirring in his chest. It was too clean, too smooth, as if every piece had fallen exactly where Caraway had wanted it. When the cheering dulled, Matthews leaned closer to his mare. Do you regret it, sir, letting it go this far? Caraway's reply was quiet, but sharp as a blade. Regret, no. A boy was saved, a killer exposed, and Redford has its future. Sometimes, Matthews, to guard the good, you must let the evil reveal itself. His words lingered in the dusk, heavy with certainty and shadow. Matthews said nothing more. The next afternoon, the field was reborn. New chalk lined the bases. Fresh banners hung across the stands. Both sides filled the bleachers again this time, cheering with one voice. Elias and Jack walked to the mound together. Their handshake drew thunderous applause, the sound rolling like victory drums. Children waved flags from both sides, shouting their names. The game that followed mattered little to the score. Each pitch, each hit, carried a weight greater than victory. It carried the fragile promise of a town willing to heal. When it ended, the crowd stood as one, clapping until the last echo faded. Jack and Elias lingered by the dugout, the noise washing over them. For the first time in years, their words carried no venom. Jack broke the silence. Your father didn't save me that night, he said, voice rough. But yesterday, you saved my boy. Elisa's eyes softened, a scarred man finally allowing himself to breathe. Maybe some wounds, he answered. Need more than time. Maybe they need a second chance. Jack hesitated, old caution warring with new hope. Elias extended his hand first, and after a heartbeat's pause, Jack took it. Their handshake lasted longer than ceremony required, two men testing whether forgiveness could bridge a decade of mistrust. The cheers swelled one last time, the town of Redford finally sounding whole. If this tale struck a chord with you, give it a like so more folks can find their way here. And for more stories of grit, justice, and redemption, ride along with us by subscribing to WestDream Tales. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, a voice carried in the hush of evening. In the West, justice is never pure. Sometimes, to keep a town alive, a man must stage the play himself. The question is, when the curtain falls, who was truly the player and who was only the pawn?